Tonight we walk through the narrow, mud-spattered alleyways of Hanyang, the capital of the Joseon Dynasty, under a sky the color of bruised plums. The year is somewhere in the 16th century. Dates don't matter much when you're about to commit a social crime so severe that your great-grandchildren will still feel the shame. You're wearing your finest clothes, a borrowed hanbok that scratches at your neck, and you're following a friend who definitely didn't explain where you were going. The air smells of charcoal smoke, pickled vegetables, and the particular mustiness of thousands of straw-roofed homes packed together like books on a shelf. Up ahead, through an open gate, you see a small courtyard where a handful of men sit on a wooden platform, their postures so rigid they might have been carved from pine. Steam rises from a small brazier at the center. Someone is making tea. And you, with your clumsy modern soul and your complete ignorance of everything that's about to happen, are walking straight into the most dangerous social situation the 16th century can offer. Here's the thing about time travel that the movies never tell you. You probably won't survive this. Not because of disease or wild animals or the lack of antibiotics, but because you'll offend someone so deeply, so fundamentally, that they'll have no choice but to make your existence on the peninsula very, very brief. In the Joseon Dynasty, tea wasn't just a beverage. It wasn't a morning caffeine delivery system or an excuse to stare at your phone for 20 minutes. Tea was a language. It was a weapon. It was a philosophical treatise written in hot water and ceramic bowls, and you're about to walk into the middle of a conversation without knowing a single word. The men in that courtyard aren't just drinking. They are negotiating status, testing character, performing virtue, and judging every single person who enters their orbit. And you, dear listener, are about to become the subject of their silent, merciless examination. But that's why you're here, isn't it? Because somewhere in your exhausted, over-caffeinated modern brain, there's a tiny flicker of curiosity about how people used to do things. How they managed to turn something as simple as pouring hot water over leaves into an art form so elaborate that it could start wars and end friendships. How they filled their days before Netflix and email and the endless scroll of bad news. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Because what you're about to witness isn't a relaxing historical tour. It's a masterclass in humiliation, administered by people who have been perfecting the art of silent judgment for centuries. Now, dim the lights, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step through the gate, and immediately the air changes. It's not just the steam from the brazier, though that adds a layer of warmth that feels almost alive against your face. It's the quality of the silence. These men weren't talking when you arrived, but now they're not talking has a different texture. It's thicker, more intentional. You've entered a space where sound itself is a kind of currency, and you're already in debt. Your friend, the one who dragged you here, bows slightly and murmurs something to the eldest man on the platform. You catch the word CHA-T, and your own name, mispronounced in a way that makes you sound like a foreign object, which, let's be honest, is exactly what you are. The elder nods without looking at you. His eyes stay fixed on the small ceramic pot in front of him, as if it contains the secrets of the universe. Maybe it does. In this world, maybe it does. You're motioned to sit. There's a cushion on the wooden floor, thin and hard, and you lower yourself onto it with all the grace of a newborn deer. Your knees immediately complain. Your back, accustomed to slouching over laptops, rebels against the sudden demand for vertical dignity. And your hands, where do you put your hands? In your lap? On your knees? Behind your back? Like you're waiting for a police officer? You glance at the other guests and try to copy them. Hands resting loosely on thighs, palms down, fingers together. It looks simple enough, but your body refuses to cooperate. Your left hand twitches. Your right hand wants to scratch your nose. You suddenly realize that you've never been fully aware of your own hands before, and now they feel like two strange animals attached to your wrists, capable of anything except stillness. The host, a man in his 40s with a face that has clearly forgotten how to smile, begins to arrange his utensils. There's a small brazier with a kettle of water just below a simmer. There's a ceramic bowl for wastewater, a bamboo whisk leaning against a tiny stand, and a low table covered in a dark cloth. And there, in the center, a small lidded bowl made of a gray-green glaze that seems to hold the light rather than reflect it. This, you gather, is where the tea will be prepared. But nothing happens quickly. Each movement of the host's hands is measured, deliberate, almost painful in its slowness. He lifts the kettle an inch, sets it down. He touches the lid of the tea bowl, doesn't open it. He adjusts the position of the whisk by the width of a single grain of rice. The minutes stretch. Your leg starts to fall asleep. And you realize, with a creeping dread, that this is the entire ceremony. This slowness, this attention to nothing, this unbearable, excruciating present moment, stretching out before you like an eternity of polite torture. You risk a glance at the other guests. Their faces are serene, composed, utterly at peace. One man, elderly and bald, has his eyes half closed, a faint smile playing at the corners of his mouth. He looks like he's experiencing profound spiritual insight. You look back at the host, who is now wiping the rim of the tea bowl with a silk cloth, even though the bowl is perfectly clean and you watched him wash it earlier. And you think, with the desperate clarity of a trapped animal, I am going to die here. Not from poison or violence, but from boredom. From the sheer, suffocating weight of all this nothing. And then the host lifts his eyes and meets yours. And you realize that he knows exactly what you're thinking. And he doesn't care. Because this isn't about you. It was never about you. It's about the tea. And the tea, unlike you, knows how to wait. You survive the first 10 minutes, which feels like an achievement worthy of a medal. Or at least a stiff drink. But there's no drink coming. Not yet. And certainly nothing stiff. Just the promise of tea at some vague point in the future when the universe decides you've suffered enough. The host, whose name you now know is Master Huang, continues his ritual with the patience of a man who has nowhere to be and nothing to prove. He lifts the kettle, pours a small amount of hot water over the tea bowl, swirls it gently, and then discards the water into the waste bowl. He does this 3 times. You count. You have nothing else to count except your own breaths and the number of times your left foot threatens to cramp. The tea house itself, you notice, is a study in deliberate simplicity. The wooden platform you're sitting on extends back into a small room with papered walls and a single scroll hanging in an alcove. The scroll shows a mountain, painted with just a few brushstrokes, and beneath it, a single line of calligraphy that you can't read but assume is profound. There are no decorations beyond this. No paintings of flowers, no colorful cushions, no evidence that anyone in this space has ever laughed or told a joke or done anything except sit in perfect, agonizing stillness. The floor is bare wood, polished to a soft gleam by generations of knees and cushions. The ceiling is low, made of dark beams that seem to press down on the room, forcing everyone into a posture of permanent humility. And the light comes from a single paper lantern in the corner, casting a warm, diffused glow that somehow makes everything feel both intimate and distant, like a memory of a room rather than the room itself. This is the day one, the tea house, and it's not just a building. It's a machine designed to produce a specific state of mind. Every element has been chosen, arranged, and maintained with a single purpose: to strip away the noise of the outside world and leave you with nothing but the present moment. The rough texture of the walls, made from mud and straw, forces your eyes to rest rather than roam. The absence of bright colors keeps your emotions from flaring. The low ceiling prevents any thought of standing tall or asserting yourself. Even the temperature, slightly cool despite the brazier, is calibrated to keep you alert without making you uncomfortable. You're not supposed to relax here. You're supposed to wake up. And waking up, you're beginning to understand, is exhausting. You glance down at your feet, or rather, at the place where your feet should be. They are hidden beneath the long folds of your hanbok, but you can feel them, and what you feel is not good. Your shoes came off at the gate, of course. Everyone's did. And you're sitting on the wooden floor in just your socks. But these aren't the cushioned, forgiving socks of the modern world. These are Joseon, traditional Korean socks with a separate compartment for the big toe. And they are made of cotton so thin you might as well be barefoot. The wood beneath you is hard and unyielding. And somewhere in the last few minutes, a splinter has found its way into your heel. It's small, barely noticeable. But now that you've noticed it, it's all you can think about. You can't reach it. You can't adjust your position. You can't do anything except sit there and feel that tiny, insistent prick of pain with every breath. And here's the thing about the Joseon tea ceremony that no one tells you until you're in the middle of it. Physical discomfort is not a bug, it's a feature. The hard floor, the thin socks, the rigid posture, they're all designed to keep you from drifting off into comfortable daydreams. The pain in your heel is an anchor, dragging you back to the present moment every time your mind tries to wander to more pleasant places. Master Huang knows this. He's counting on it. Every ache and cramp you feel is part of the ritual. A reminder that you are a body in a body, here and now, unable to escape into the past or future. The Zen monks who perfected this ceremony believed that enlightenment wasn't something you achieved in moments of blissful transcendence, but in moments of complete, unadorned presence. Including moments when your foot is falling asleep and there's a splinter in your heel and you'd give anything to scratch your nose. You risk another glance at the other guests. The elderly man with the half-closed eyes hasn't moved. A younger man, maybe 30, sits with his back so straight you could use him as a level. His hands rest on his thighs, palms down, fingers together, exactly as they were when you first sat down. Has he blinked? You can't remember. You suspect he hasn't. He's achieved a level of bodily control that seems almost superhuman, and you hate him a little for it. Next to him, a woman in her 50s, the only other woman in the room, you realize, sits with her head slightly bowed, her eyes fixed on a point somewhere in the middle distance. She's wearing a simpler hanbok than yours, gray and unadorned, and there's something in her stillness that feels different from the others. Less like control and more like surrender. Less like achievement and more like grace. You wonder how long she's been doing this. You wonder if she ever gets splinters. Master Huang lifts the kettle again. This time, instead of pouring water over the tea bowl, he pours it into a small, handleless cup and sets it aside. The steam rises, curls in the lantern light, and disappears. No one moves. No one speaks. The silence has become so dense you could spread it on bread. And in that silence, you hear something you hadn't noticed before. The sound of the water. Not just the pouring, but the water itself, inside the kettle, moving against the metal as it approaches a boil. It's a soft sound, almost musical, a whisper of bubbles forming and rising and breaking against the surface. You've heard water boil thousands of times, but you've never listened to it. Not like this. Not with your whole attention funneled into that single, delicate sound. And for a moment, just a moment, you forget about the splinter. You forget about your aching knees. You forget about everything except the water, the steam, the light, and the strange, unexpected piece of paying attention to nothing else. Then your stomach growls. Loudly. Obscenely. In the perfect silence of the tea house, it sounds like a rock slide. The younger man's eyebrow twitches. You see it, the tiniest movement, but you see it. The elderly man's eyes open fully for the first time. And Master Huang pauses, his hand hovering above the kettle, and looks directly at you. His expression doesn't change. He doesn't frown or smile or show any sign of disapproval. But in that look, you understand everything. You understand that your stomach has just announced your presence in the most vulgar way possible. You understand that this sound will be remembered, discussed, and judged long after the tea is gone. You understand that in the language of the tea house, you have just shouted an obscenity. And you understand, with absolute certainty, that there is nothing you can do about it except sit there, in your borrowed hanbok in your splintered heel, and wait for the next terrible thing your body decides to do. Your stomach eventually stops its rebellion, though the memory of that sound lingers in the air like smoke after a fire. Master Huang has returned to his ritual, apparently unperturbed, but you can feel the shift in the room's energy. You're no longer just a stranger who doesn't know the rules. You're a variable, an unpredictable element that might do anything at any moment. The other guests have adjusted their awareness accordingly. They are not looking at you, that would be rude, but you sense that they are monitoring you, the way you might monitor a slightly unbalanced candle near a pile of dry papers. One wrong move, and everything could go up in flames. And now, as Master Huang begins the next phase of the ceremony, you realize that the stakes are about to get much higher. Because now we come to the hands. Your hands. Those two appendages that you've been taking for granted your entire life, using them to type and wave and scratch and gesture without a second thought. In the Joseon tea ceremony, your hands are not merely hands. They are instruments of communication, vessels of intention, and potential weapons of mass social destruction. Every finger placement, every wrist rotation, every tiny movement carries meaning that you cannot even begin to comprehend. And you, with your modern habit of grabbing things and putting them down wherever, are about to commit a series of hand-related crimes that will echo through the centuries. Watch Master Huang's hands for a moment. Really watch them. He's reaching for the tea bowl now, but he doesn't reach the way you would. His hand approaches the bowl slowly, almost hesitantly, as if asking permission to touch it. When his fingers make contact, they don't grab or grip. They settle, gently, finding the exact points where the bowl's curves meet his skin with the least resistance. He lifts it not with his fingers alone, but with his whole hand, his wrist, his forearm. The entire limb working as a single unit to raise the bowl to exactly the right height. And then he pauses, holding the bowl in the air, examining it as if seeing it for the first time. Which, in a way, he is. In the tea ceremony, no two moments are the same. The light changes, the temperature changes, the drinker changes. The bowl itself is never quite the same bowl it was a moment ago. And the hands must acknowledge this, must adapt to it, must treat each encounter as a unique and sacred meeting. You look down at your own hands, resting on your thighs as you've been taught, and you suddenly see them differently. They look clumsy, heavy, capable only of grasping and releasing, never of the delicate negotiations you're witnessing. Your fingers are too straight, too tense. Your palms are pressing against your thighs with unnecessary force. You try to soften them, to let them relax into something more natural. But the moment you think about relaxing, you tense up even more. It's the paradox of the tea ceremony. The more you try to do things right, the more wrong they become. The only way to succeed is to stop trying, to let your body remember what your mind has forgotten. But your body doesn't remember. Your body only remembers keyboards and coffee mugs and the casual way you toss your car keys onto the counter. It has no memory of tea ceremonies, no muscle memory for this level of precision. You're starting from zero, and zero, in this room, is not a passing grade. Master Huang sets the bowl down and reaches for the whisk. Again, the same deliberate approach, the same gentle settling of fingers, the same pause before movement. He lifts the whisk, examines it, and then begins to rinse it in a small bowl of hot water. The whisk is made of bamboo, split into dozens of fine tines that fan out like the petals of a flower. As he rinses it, the tines move in the water, flexing and releasing, and you realize that this whisk is alive in a way that plastic and metal never could be. It has a memory of its own, a shape it wants to return to. It has been carved from a living thing, and something of that life remains in its flexibility, its responsiveness, its willingness to bend without breaking. The younger man across from you shifts slightly, and you catch a glimpse of his hands as they rest on his thighs. They are elegant hands, you notice, with long fingers and clean nails, but there's something else about them that draws your attention. A small scar on his knuckle, faded with age. A callus on his palm that speaks of physical work. These hands have a history, a story they tell without words. And you realize that in the tea ceremony, hands are not anonymous. They reveal everything. The farmer's hands are different from the scholar's hands. The warrior's hands carry different stories than the merchant's. Even in stillness, even in perfect imitation of the proper posture, the hands cannot lie. They speak of where you've been and what you've done, of the life you've lived and the work that's shaped you. Your hands, you suddenly understand, are screaming your modern identity to everyone in the room. The softness of your palms, the absence of calluses, the particular way your fingers twitch toward invisible screens, all of it is visible, all of it is being read, and none of it is earning you any points. Historians still argue whether the elaborate hand etiquette of the Joseon tea ceremony developed organically or was deliberately codified by scholars seeking to create a visible marker of class distinction. Some point to the 9 chapters on the art of tea, a text from the early dynasty that spends nearly a third of its pages describing proper hand placement. Others argue that the rules emerged from Buddhist meditation practices, where hand position, or mudra, was understood as a direct expression of spiritual state. Whatever the origin, by the 16th century, the language of hands had become so complex that entire books were written on the subject. There were hands for greeting and hands for receiving, hands for showing respect and hands for showing gratitude. There were hands that said, "I am your equal," and hands that said, "I am your servant," and hands that said, "I am your superior," but pretending not to be. And all of these hands looked almost identical to an untrained observer. The difference was in millimeters, in degrees of rotation, in the exact pressure of fingertip against ceramic. Master Huang has finished preparing the tea. You can see it now, a pale green liquid in the bottom of the bowl, topped with a fine foam created by the whisk. He lifts the bowl and turns it slightly, presenting its best face to the room. And then he sets it down before the elderly man with the half-closed eyes. This, you understand, is the moment. The tea has been made. The first bowl is about to be served. And every hand in the room is about to perform its most important role. The elderly man receives the bowl. Watch his hands. They rise from his thighs slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, then with gathering purpose. They approach the bowl not from above, but from the side, fingers curving to meet its shape before they touch it. When contact comes, it's simultaneous, all 5 fingers finding their places at exactly the same moment, as if the bowl has been waiting for them, as if hand and ceramic were designed for each other across centuries. He lifts the bowl, but he doesn't bring it to his lips. Instead, he holds it before him, at chest height, and bows his head slightly. A moment of acknowledgement. A wordless conversation between the drinker and the tea, the guest and the host, the present moment and all the moments that led to it. Then, and only then, does he raise the bowl to his lips. You watch him drink, and you realize that even this, even the act of drinking, is governed by rules you cannot see. The angle of his head, the placement of his lips on the rim, the number of sips he takes before lowering the bowl. It all matters. It all means something. And when he finally sets the bowl down, his hands perform one more ritual. A gentle rotation of the bowl, bringing its opposite face forward, so that the next person to receive it will see a different aspect of its beauty. He sets it down not with a placement, but with a release, a letting go that is as deliberate as the taking up that preceded it. And then his hands return to his thighs, palms down, fingers together, exactly as they were before, as if nothing has happened. As if the entire universe hasn't just shifted on its axis. You look at your own hands again. They are trembling slightly. You didn't notice until now, but they are. A fine tremor, barely visible, but unmistakable once you see it. Nerves? Probably. Or caffeine withdrawal. Or the simple, overwhelming pressure of being in a room where every millimeter matters and you don't know how to measure anything. You try to steady them, to press them more firmly against your thighs, but the trembling continues. And you know, with the same certainty that told you your stomach growl would be remembered, that everyone in this room has noticed, that they've seen your hands betray you, that they are drawing conclusions about your character, your upbringing, your very soul, based on the involuntary shaking of your fingers. There's nothing you can do about it. Nothing except sit there, with your trembling hands and your splintered heel and your growling stomach, and wait for the moment when Master Huang finally turns to you and offers you the bowl. And pray that when that moment comes, your hands remember something they've never been taught. The elderly man finishes his tea with a final, audible sip that seems to satisfy everyone in the room. He sets the bowl down, rotates it with that same deliberate grace, and returns his hands to his thighs. The bowl sits there, empty but somehow still full, still radiating the warmth of the tea that just left it. And now Master Huang's attention returns to the brazier, where the kettle has been quietly doing its work throughout the entire first serving. You watch him approach it, and you notice something you missed before. The kettle isn't just sitting on the coals. It's suspended from a metal arm that allows it to be raised and lowered, moved closer to the heat or farther away. This isn't a simple pot on a stove. This is an instrument, calibrated with precision, and the man operating it is a musician tuning his instrument before each note. Master Huang reaches for the kettle, but again, the approach is everything. His hand hovers near the handle, not touching it, sensing the heat radiating from the metal. He's not checking the temperature. He knows the temperature, has known it for the last 20 minutes. He's communing with it, acknowledging it, thanking it, perhaps, for its patience and its service. When he finally takes the handle, his grip is light, almost tentative, as if the kettle might break if handled too firmly. He lifts it from its hook and holds it suspended in the air, watching the steam rise, listening to the sound of the water within. And then, slowly, he tilts it, pouring a thin stream of hot water into a small measuring cup. This is where things get complicated, because in the Joseon Dynasty, water temperature wasn't just a matter of preference or convenience. It was a moral issue, a philosophical position, a statement about your relationship with the universe and everyone in it. The great tea masters taught that water boiled too vigorously became old water, depleted of its vital energy, incapable of drawing out the true essence of the leaves. Water boiled too gently, on the other hand, was young water, immature, undeveloped, unable to fully engage with the tea. The perfect temperature was a moving target, dependent on the season, the weather, the specific leaves being used, and the spiritual state of the person doing the boiling. And achieving it required not just skill, but virtue. A person with an impure heart could not boil water correctly. A person with troubled thoughts would produce troubled tea. The water knew. The water always knew. You watch Master Huang pour the measured water into a small bowl, where he observes it with an intensity that seems almost absurd. What could he possibly see? It's water. Hot water. Clear and steaming and indistinguishable from any other hot water you've ever seen. But he sees something. His eyes narrow slightly. His head tilts. And then he nods, apparently satisfied, and pours the water back into the kettle. This is not, you realize, a test of the water itself. It's a test of his own perception. He's checking to make sure he's present enough, aware enough, pure enough to proceed. And only after confirming that he is, does he move to the next step. Now he reaches for the tea leaves. They are stored in a small ceramic container, tightly lidded to preserve their freshness. He opens it and tips a small amount into a measuring scoop, then holds the scoop close to his face, inhaling deeply. His eyes close. His expression softens. For a moment, he looks almost human, almost approachable, almost like someone you might have a conversation with. Then the moment passes, and here's the Master Huang again, the living embodiment of ritual, pouring the leaves into a fresh tea bowl with the same deliberate care he's shown everything else. But here's where your modern assumptions really start to fail you. Because in your world, tea is tea. You buy it in boxes or tins, you stuff it into bags or infusers, you pour water over it and hope for the best. In the Joseon Dynasty, tea was a living thing. It had a life cycle, a personality, a relationship with the place where it grew and the people who tended it. The leaves in Master Huang's bowl came from a specific mountain, harvested on a specific day by specific hands. They had been processed in a specific way, stored in specific conditions, and transported along specific routes to reach this room, this moment, this bowl. Every step of their journey was encoded in their flavor, and the ceremony existed, in part, to honor that journey. To acknowledge the labor and love and luck that had brought these leaves to this water. To drink tea without acknowledging all of this was not just rude. It was ungrateful. It was a refusal to see the interconnectedness of all things, the vast network of relationships that made a single cup possible. Master Huang pours the hot water over the leaves. The sound is different now, fuller, richer. The sound of water meeting something that welcomes it. Steam rises, carrying the scent of the tea into the room. And for the first time since you arrived, you smell something that your modern brain recognizes as desirable. It's grassy, slightly sweet, with a hint of something almost like seaweed. It's the smell of life, of growth, of mountainsides in the rain. You inhale deeply, and you feel something shift in your chest, a loosening of tension you didn't know you were holding. The tea is working already, before you've even tasted it. The scent alone is doing what the silence and the stillness and the splinter in your heel could not. It's reaching past your defenses and touching something older, something deeper, something that remembers a time before screens and schedules and the constant hum of obligation. But Master Huang isn't done. He watches the leaves steep for exactly the right number of heartbeats. You can see him counting, his pulse visible in the slight movement of his throat. And then he pours the tea into a separate bowl, leaving the leaves behind. This first infusion, you learn later, is not for drinking. It's for waking the leaves up, for reminding them what they're supposed to do. It's poured over the tea bowl itself, warming it, preparing it, and then discarded. A sacrifice. A first draft. A practice round for leaves that have been waiting all year for this moment. And now the real steeping begins. Fresh water, fresh leaves, fresh attention. Master Huang pours with the same deliberate care, but there's something different in his movements now. A confidence, perhaps. A sense that the ritual is approaching its climax. He sets the kettle down, covers the tea bowl with a small lid, and waits. The room waits with him. The silence is complete, but it's no longer the oppressive silence of your first minutes here. It's a living silence, a pregnant silence, a silence that contains everything that's about to happen. You're part of it now, whether you want to be or not. Your breathing has slowed to match the room's breathing. Your heart has found a rhythm that aligns with the rhythm of the ceremony. Even your trembling hands have stilled, as if the tea itself has reached out and calmed them. Historians still argue whether the Joseon Dynasty's obsession with water temperature was purely practical or carried deeper symbolic meaning. Some scholars point to the Neo-Confucian emphasis on the investigation of things, the idea that studying the natural world reveals moral truths, and suggest that mastering water was a form of self-cultivation. Others see the influence of Daoist alchemy, with its belief that physical processes mirror spiritual ones. Boiling water too violently, in this view, was not just a culinary error but a spiritual failure, a sign that the boiler's own inner fire was out of balance. Whatever the truth, the result was a culture where serving someone improperly heated tea was genuinely insulting. It said, "I have not taken the time to know myself, and therefore I cannot properly serve you." It said, "My chaos has infected your cup." Master Huang lifts the lid and peers inside. The tea is ready. You can see it in his eyes, in the slight nod he gives himself, in the way his shoulders relax just a fraction. He lifts the bowl and pours the tea into a fresh serving bowl, careful to distribute the liquid evenly, to leave no drop behind. The color is pale green, almost translucent, with a slight opacity that suggests depth beyond what your eyes can see. He sets the serving bowl before the younger man, the second in the hierarchy, you now understand, and returns his hands to his lap. And as the younger man reaches for the bowl, performing his own ritual of reception, you realize something that should have been obvious from the start. The tea ceremony is not about the tea. It never was. The tea is just the excuse. The real work is the attention. The real gift is the presence. The real offering is a human being, fully awake, offering another human being the best of themselves, boiled to exactly the right temperature and served in a bowl that has been waiting for this moment for 1,000 years. The younger man receives his bowl with hands that have clearly done this before. There's no hesitation, no fumbling, no moment of uncertainty about where to place his fingers or how to lift. He brings the bowl to his chest, bows his head, and then raises it to his lips. 3 sips, you count them. And then he lowers the bowl, rotates it, and sets it down with the same quiet finality as the elderly man before him. The ceremony continues its slow, inexorable march toward the moment you've been dreading and anticipating in equal measure. The moment when the bowl comes to you. But first, there's something you need to understand about that bowl and what it represents. In the Joseon tea ceremony, the bowl is not just a container. It's a universe. A small, ceramic universe with its own mountains and valleys, its own textures and temperatures, its own history and future. The bowl in front of the younger man was made by a potter whose name you'll never know, fired in a kiln that no longer exists, glazed with ash from a forest that has long since been harvested. It carries the marks of its making, the slight unevenness of the rim, the tiny pit in the glaze, the way the light catches on a curve that was shaped by human hands rather than machines. These aren't flaws. They are signatures. Proof that this bowl is unique, irreplaceable, alive in a way that factory-made ceramics can never be. And now, as the younger man sets it down and Master Huang prepares the next serving, you realize that you're going to have to hold that universe. You're going to have to lift it, rotate it, bring it to your lips, and set it down again. And every single thing you do with it will be observed, interpreted, and judged. Not just by Master Huang, but by everyone in the room. The elderly man with the half-closed eyes, who hasn't missed a single detail of your performance since you arrived. The younger man, who probably thinks you're a barbarian and is trying to figure out how to tell his friends about you later. The woman in grey, whose stillness you still can't quite read, but who you suspect sees more than anyone. They are all watching. They are all waiting. And you, with your complete ignorance of bowl etiquette, are about to give them something to talk about for weeks. Master Huang prepares the next bowl of tea. The same careful movements, the same attention to temperature and timing, the same quiet devotion to the ritual. But this time, when he lifts the serving bowl, he doesn't set it down immediately. He holds it, turns it slightly, examines it from different angles. And then he does something that makes your heart stop. He looks directly at you. Not a glance, not a brief acknowledgement, but a full, sustained gaze that seems to reach into your soul and take inventory. You've been looked at before, but never like this. Never with this combination of assessment and acceptance, of judgment and invitation. He's seeing you, all of you, the fear and the ignorance and the desperate desire to not mess this up. And he's making a decision about whether you're worthy of the bowl he's holding. The moment stretches. The room holds its breath. And then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, the corner of Master Huang's mouth twitches. It's not a smile. You're pretty sure he's incapable of smiling. But it's something. A recognition, perhaps. An acknowledgement that you're trying, even if you're failing. He sets the bowl down before you, and you understand that this is the most important moment of your life so far. More important than your first day of school, your first job, your first love. Because those moments only mattered to you and a handful of others. This moment matters to everyone in this room, and through them, to everyone they'll tell, and through them, to history itself. The way you receive this bowl will be remembered. It will become a story. It will shape how these people think of you for the rest of their lives, and possibly beyond. But you can't think about that now. Now you have to act. Your hands, which have been resting on your thighs throughout the entire ceremony, need to move. They need to approach the bowl with the right combination of confidence and humility, of eagerness and restraint. They need to find the exact points on the bowl's surface where contact is appropriate, and they need to make that contact with exactly the right pressure. They need to lift the bowl to exactly the right height, hold it for exactly the right duration, and then bring it to your lips in exactly the right way. And they need to do all of this without trembling, without hesitating, without giving away the fact that you have no idea what you're doing. You take a breath. You remember what you've observed. The approach, slow and deliberate. The hands, softening as they near the bowl. The fingers, curving to meet the ceramic rather than grabbing at it. You try to copy these things, to perform them with your own clumsy hands. And something miraculous happens. It works. Your fingers find the bowl. Your palms cup its warmth. You lift it, and it's lighter than you expected, and warmer, and somehow more alive than anything you've ever held. You bring it to your chest, bow your head. And for a moment, you forget that anyone is watching. You forget the rules and the judgments and the centuries of expectation bearing down on you. You forget everything except the bowl in your hands and the tea within it and the strange, unexpected peace of simply being here, now, holding something beautiful. But you can't stay in that moment forever. The tea needs to be drunk. You raise the bowl to your lips, and now you face a new challenge. How much to drink, and how to drink it. The elderly man took 3 sips. The younger man took 3 sips. 3 seems to be the number. But is it exactly 3? Or approximately 3? Is there a specific volume per sip? Or does it vary? And what about the sound? The elderly man made an audible sip. A sound of appreciation that seemed to please Master Huang. The younger man made a similar sound. Is the sound required? Is it optional? Is there a wrong way to sip? A way that suggests you're not appreciating the tea properly? You decide to aim for 3 sips, moderately loud, with a brief pause between each. Your first sip is too hot. You weren't prepared for the temperature, despite watching the steam rise from the bowl. You manage not to spit it out, but the surprise registers on your face, and you see the younger man's eyebrow twitch again. Your second sip is better, cooler, and you're able to actually taste the tea. It's unlike anything you've ever experienced. Grassy, yes, but also nutty, with a hint of something almost like citrus and a finish that lingers on your tongue long after you've swallowed. Your third sip is slower, more deliberate, an attempt to capture that flavor again, to hold on to it. You lower the bowl, and now comes the moment you've been dreading, setting it down. The elderly man rotated his bowl before setting it down. The younger man did the same. You saw them do it, but you didn't see exactly how they did it. Was it a full rotation, or just a partial turn? Did they use both hands, or just one? And what about the placement? Should the bowl go back exactly where it was, or somewhere slightly different? You hesitate, the bowl hovering in your hands. And in that hesitation, you feel the room's attention sharpen. They are waiting. They are watching. They are wondering if you know what comes next. You don't. But you have to do something. You rotate the bowl, a full rotation, you think, though you're not sure. And you set it down gently, right where it was before. You remove your hands slowly, the way you've seen the others do, and you return them to your thighs. Palms down, fingers together. You've done it. You've received the bowl, drunk the tea, and returned it. It's over. You look up, expecting to see approval, or at least relief that you didn't completely humiliate yourself. But what you see is something else entirely. Master Huang is looking at the bowl, not at you. His expression hasn't changed, but there's something in the way he's looking that makes your stomach clench. He's examining the bowl's placement, the exact position of the bowl on the table, the relationship between the bowl's current orientation and the orientation it had when he set it down. And you realize, with a sinking feeling, that you've made a mistake. You don't know what mistake, but you've made one. The bowl is wrong somehow. The rotation was wrong, or the placement was wrong, or the way you set it down communicated something you didn't intend. The room is silent, but the silence has changed. It's no longer the living silence of shared attention. It's the silence of a held breath, of waiting for something to happen. And Master Huang, still looking at the bowl, still not meeting your eyes, is deciding what that something will be. The silence stretches like taffy in the cold. Master Huang continues to study the bowl, and you continue to study him, trying to read something, anything, in his expressionless face. The other guests have become statues, They're breathing so shallow you can't even see their chests move. You've done something wrong. That much is clear. But what? The rotation seemed right. The placement seemed right. You copied everything you saw, performed every movement with the desperate attention of a student who knows the exam is graded on a curve. And still, somehow, you failed. Then Master Huang looks up, and his eyes meet yours. And you see something you didn't expect: amusement. Not the warm, friendly amusement of someone sharing a joke, but something colder, more intellectual. The amusement of a mathematician who's just watched someone solve a problem in the most creative possible way. He doesn't speak. Speaking would break too many rules. But something passes between you nonetheless. An acknowledgement that you tried. That you failed. That the failure itself was interesting. And then he reaches out and adjusts the bowl, rotating it just a few degrees counterclockwise, returning it to its proper orientation. The room exhales. The younger man's shoulders drop a fraction of an inch. The elderly man's eyes close again. And you understand, with the force of a physical blow, that your mistake was not in the rotation or the placement. Your mistake was in assuming that the bowl's position mattered at all. It wasn't about the bowl. It was about your relationship to the bowl. About your understanding of where the bowl belonged in the larger pattern of the ceremony. You set it down where you thought it should go. You didn't set it down where it needed to go. And those two places, you now realize, are very far apart. But the moment passes, as all moments must, and the ceremony continues. Master Huang prepares another bowl of tea, and this time he serves the woman in gray. You watch her with new eyes, trying to understand who she is and why she's here. She's the only woman in the room, which in 16th century Korea means something. Either she's exceptionally wealthy, exceptionally connected, or exceptionally brave. Women did participate in tea culture, but usually in separate spaces, with separate rules. To be here, in this mixed company, suggests a status that transcends normal gender boundaries. A widow of high rank, perhaps, or a scholar in her own right, recognized for her learning despite the conventions of the time. Or maybe something simpler, the wife of one of these men, included because her presence adds something to the ceremony that the men alone cannot provide. She receives the bowl with hands that are both delicate and strong. You notice the way her fingers curve around the ceramic, the way her wrists support the weight without apparent effort. She's done this before, many times, and her body remembers what her mind doesn't need to think about. She brings the bowl to her chest, bows her head, and then pauses. Longer than the men paused. Long enough that you start to wonder if something's wrong. But nothing's wrong. She's simply present, fully present, in a way that the men, for all their discipline, have not quite achieved. There's no performance in her stillness. No awareness of being watched. She's alone with the tea, even though she's surrounded by people. And that aloneness is the most intimate thing you've witnessed all evening. She drinks 3 sips, like the others, but somehow different. Slower, perhaps, or more complete. When she sets the bowl down, she doesn't rotate it immediately. She holds it for a moment, still connected to it, still in conversation with it. Then she rotates it, exactly the right amount, you now see, and sets it down with a finality that feels like a closing door. Her hands return to her lap, and she's still again, as still as she was before, as still as she'll be for the rest of the ceremony. And you realize that you've been watching her the way you watch the men, measuring her against their performance, and that was exactly the wrong thing to do. She's not competing with them. She's not even in the same category. She's doing something the men can't do, or won't do, or don't know how to do. She's being fully herself within the constraints of the ritual. And that selfhood is so complete, so unself-conscious, that it transforms the ritual itself. Now Master Huang prepares tea for himself. This is the moment you've been waiting for, though you didn't know it. The host drinking his own tea is a statement, a declaration that the ceremony is complete, that all have been served, that the circle is closed. But it's also something else, a moment of vulnerability. For the first time since you arrived, Master Huang is not serving, not monitoring, not controlling. He's receiving, just like everyone else. And in that receiving, you see something you haven't seen before. A softening, a release. The mask of the host drops away, and underneath is just a man, tired and human and grateful for a moment of rest. He drinks his tea with the same 3 sips, the same rotation, the same placement. But there's something in his eyes when he sets the bowl down that wasn't there before. A hint of the person behind the performance. A glimpse of the soul that chose this life, this ritual, this endless attention to detail as a path through the world. And now, something shifts. The ceremony isn't over. You can feel that. But the energy has changed. The tension has eased. The guests are no longer performing for each other. Or not only performing. They are resting in the space the tea has created. The elderly man opens his eyes fully and looks around the room, meeting each person's gaze in turn. The younger man allows himself a small smile. The woman in grey adjusts her posture slightly, settling more deeply into her cushion. And Master Huang, finished with his tea, begins to rearrange his utensils. Not cleaning them, that will come later, but simply moving them, adjusting their positions, preparing for whatever comes next. You realize that the ceremony has multiple phases, multiple movements, and you've only experienced the first. The serving was just the beginning. What follows is the digestion, the integration, the slow return from the world of ritual to the world of ordinary life. Historians still argue about the social dynamics of the Joseon tea ceremony. Was it truly egalitarian? A space where hierarchy dissolved in the shared experience of tea? Or was it, like everything else in that intensely stratified society, a performance of hierarchy, a way of making inequality visible and acceptable? The evidence points both ways. Some texts describe ceremonies where the lowest servant could sit beside the highest noble, united by their common humanity. Others detail elaborate seating arrangements, with positions assigned based on rank, age, and gender. The truth, as always, probably lies somewhere in between. The tea ceremony was a space where hierarchy could be both affirmed and transcended, where you knew your place but also knew that your place was not the only thing that mattered. In the presence of good tea, properly prepared, all were equal. But they were also, always, exactly who they were in the world outside the tea house. The ceremony didn't erase identity. It revealed it. You think about your own place in this room. The seat you were given, near the edge of the platform, slightly lower than the others. The way Master Huang served you after everyone else, signaling your lower status. The adjustments he made to the bowl after you set it down, correcting your error without comment. You're at the bottom of this particular hierarchy, and everyone knows it. But here's the strange thing. It doesn't feel bad. It doesn't feel like humiliation or rejection. It feels like accuracy. Like being seen clearly and placed exactly where you belong. In the modern world, you're constantly told that you can be anything, do anything, go anywhere. The pressure of that infinite possibility is exhausting. Here, in this room, you know exactly where you stand. You're the outsider, the novice, the one who doesn't know how to hold a bowl. And that knowledge, paradoxically, is freeing. You don't have to pretend. You don't have to perform. You just have to be what you are. A beginner, learning, failing, trying again. And somehow, in this room full of experts, that's enough. The ceremony drifts into a new phase, one you didn't anticipate. The tea has been drunk, the bowls have been returned, and yet no one moves to leave. No one speaks. The silence continues, but it's a different silence now. Softer, more comfortable, like the silence between old friends who don't need words. You shift on your cushion, testing the limits of your newly discovered freedom, and find that you can move slightly without drawing disapproving glances. Your leg has gone completely numb, and you need to adjust it, but you do so slowly, carefully, trying not to disturb the fragile peace that has settled over the room. And then the elderly man speaks. His voice is soft, almost a whisper, but in the perfect silence of the tea house, every word carries. He's not addressing you directly. He's addressing the room, the space, the lingering presence of the tea. But his words are about the bowl. The bowl you held, the bowl you rotated incorrectly, the bowl that Master Huang had to adjust. He's talking about its glaze, its color, the way it catches the light. He's praising it. And as he speaks, you realize that he's not just making conversation. He's performing an essential part of the ceremony, the appreciation of the vessel. In the Joseon tea tradition, you don't compliment the tea first. The tea is transient, ephemeral, here and gone in a moment. But the bowl remains. The bowl will be here tomorrow, and next year, and for generations after you're gone. To praise the tea before the bowl is to miss the point entirely. It's to prioritize your own pleasure over the enduring beauty of the object that made that pleasure possible. You look at the bowl with new eyes. It's not just a bowl. It's a statement about everything that matters. Craftsmanship, tradition, the relationship between human hands and natural materials. The glaze is a pale green, the color of jade, but it's not uniform. There are variations, depths, places where the glaze pools thicker and appears almost black. The clay beneath is visible at the rim, a warm gray that contrasts with the cool green above. And the shape. You hadn't really noticed the shape before, but now you see it. The way the walls curve outward slightly, then in again at the lip. The way the foot is slightly recessed, creating a shadow that anchors the bowl to the table. This bowl was not designed. It was discovered, uncovered, allowed to become what it always wanted to be. The potter who made it didn't impose a vision on the clay. He listened to the clay, followed its lead, helped it find its own form. And the result is something that feels inevitable, as if it could never have been any other way. The younger man responds, adding his own observations. He notices different things, the texture of the glaze, the way it feels against the fingers, the tiny crack near the base that doesn't diminish the bowl's beauty but somehow enhances it. You learn that this crack is called kintsugi in the Japanese tradition, though the Koreans have their own word for it, their own way of understanding that breakage is not the end but a new beginning. The bowl was broken once, long ago, and carefully repaired. The crack has been filled with lacquer mixed with gold, so that the damage becomes a decoration, a reminder that nothing lasts forever, and that's exactly as it should be. You think about your own cracks, your own repairs, and wonder if anyone will ever look at you the way these men are looking at that bowl, with appreciation for the gold that holds you together. The woman in gray speaks last. Her voice is even softer than the elderly man's, and you have to lean forward to hear her. She's not talking about the bowl's appearance or its history. She's talking about its feel in her hands, the way it warmed as she held it, the way the tea's heat traveled through the ceramic and into her palms. She's talking about the relationship between bowl and drinker, The intimate conversation that happens when you hold something made by human hands and filled with something grown by the earth. And as she speaks, you realize that she's not just describing her experience. She's inviting you to share it, to remember what it felt like when you held the bowl yourself. You close your eyes and try to recall the weight, the warmth, the slight roughness of the glaze against your fingertips. It comes back to you, not as memory but as presence, as if you're still holding it, still connected to it, still in that moment of perfect attention that lasted only seconds but somehow contained eternity. This is the genius of the Joseon tea ceremony. You realize, it's not just about drinking tea. It's about learning to see, learning to notice, learning to appreciate the things that modern life trains you to ignore. The bowl that sits on your shelf at home, the one you bought at a mall and never really look at. What would it be like to examine it the way these people are examining this bowl? To trace its curves with your fingers, to study its glaze in different lights, to wonder about the hands that made it and the journey it took to reach you? You probably never will. None of us probably will. But for this moment, in this room, you're being given a glimpse of what that kind of attention looks like. And it's beautiful. It's exhausting, but it's beautiful. Master Huang nods, acknowledging the comments, and then he adds his own. He speaks about the potter who made the bowl, a man he knew slightly, now dead. He speaks about the kiln where it was fired, a cave in a hillside that collapsed years ago. He speaks about the clay itself, dug from a riverbank that has since been paved over to make a road. The bowl, you understand, is a repository of losses. Every person and place and moment that contributed to its existence is gone now, except for what lingers in the bowl itself. And when you hold it, when you really hold it with the kind of attention this ceremony demands, you're not just holding clay and glaze. You're holding memories. You're holding history. You're holding the accumulated weight of all the lives that touched this object before it reached your hands. And now, something unexpected happens. Master Huang lifts the bowl and offers it to you. Not with tea this time. The tea is long gone, but empty, simply as an object to be appreciated. You hesitate, unsure if this is allowed, if you're worthy of holding it again after your earlier mistake. But his eyes are patient, waiting, and you understand that this is part of the ceremony too. The guest must learn to see, and seeing requires holding. You reach out, your hands still clumsy but less afraid now, and you take the bowl. It's different without the tea. Lighter, somehow, and cooler. You turn it in your hands, feeling the places where the glaze thickens, the place where the crack has been filled with gold. You hold it up to the light and watch the way the green deepens and pales as the angle changes. You run your thumb along the rim, feeling the slight unevenness that proves it was made by human hands. And as you hold it, you feel something you can't quite name. A connection, not just to the bowl but to everyone who has ever held it. To the potter who shaped it. To the people who served tea in it and drank tea from it. To Master Huang and the elderly man and the younger man and the woman in grey. To centuries of hands, all holding this same object, all finding in it something of themselves. You're part of that chain now, part of that history. And when you finally set the bowl down, rotating it exactly as you've been taught, you do so with a gentleness that surprises you. You're not just returning an object. You're continuing a conversation. And for the first time since you entered this room, you feel like you might have something to say. The bowl returns to its place, and the room settles into a new kind of quiet. The conversation about the vessel has ended, but something lingers in the air, a shared appreciation, a collective acknowledgement that something beautiful has been recognized and honored. You feel strangely full, though you've only consumed a few sips of tea. fuller than you've felt after entire meals, after whole days of eating and drinking without pause. It's as if the attention itself has nourished you, has filled some empty space inside that you didn't even know was there. And now, without any signal you can detect, the ceremony shifts again. The elderly man closes his eyes. The younger man does the same. The woman in grey lowers her head, her gaze dropping to her folded hands. And Master Huang, still seated at the center of the platform, becomes utterly still. Not the stillness of someone waiting, but the stillness of someone who has arrived, who is exactly where they need to be, doing exactly what they need to do, which is nothing at all. You've heard about this, of course. The Zen Buddhist practice of silent sitting, of meditation without object or goal. But you've never experienced it, never been in a room where people simply sat together, saying nothing, doing nothing, for what feels like an impossibly long time. The minutes pass. Your mind, accustomed to constant stimulation, begins to rebel. It wants to plan, to remember, to worry, to wonder. It wants to check its phone, though there is no phone. It wants to make lists, though there is nothing to list. It wants to do anything except be here, now, in this silence, with these people who seem to have found a peace that you can't even imagine. But you have no choice. You're trapped in this silence, bound by the same rules that bind everyone else. And so you sit, and you breathe, and you watch your mind do its frantic dance, and slowly, gradually, you begin to notice something. The dance doesn't matter. The thoughts come and go, but you remain. The worries rise and fall, but you remain. Beneath all the noise, there's a stillness that has been there all along, waiting for you to stop moving long enough to notice it. And in this room, with these people, you're finally still enough, finally quiet enough, finally present enough to feel the presence that has always been there, underneath everything, supporting everything, making everything possible. This is what the Zen masters mean when they talk about enlightenment. You realize, it's not a special state, not a mystical experience, not something you achieve after years of practice. It's the simplest thing in the world. It's just being here, fully here, without wishing you were somewhere else. And the reason it's so hard is not because it's complicated, but because it's so simple that your mind refuses to believe it. Your mind wants drama, wants excitement, wants something to strive for and achieve. It doesn't want to just sit here, breathing, in a room full of strangers, doing nothing. But here you are, and here they are, and somehow, impossibly, it's enough. The silence deepens. You're not sure how long you've been sitting. Minutes, hours, it's impossible to tell. Time has become irrelevant, a concept without meaning in this space of pure presence. The elderly man hasn't moved. The younger man hasn't moved. The woman in grey hasn't moved. And Master Huang, at the center, has become almost invisible, so still that your eyes slide past him without registering his presence. You feel like you're sitting in a room full of Buddhas, full of beings who have transcended the ordinary human condition and achieved something you can't even name. And then, without warning, the elderly man opens his eyes. He looks around the room, meeting each person's gaze in turn. When his eyes meet yours, you feel something shift inside you, a recognition, perhaps, or a transmission. He's not judging you. He's not evaluating you. He's simply seeing you, fully and completely. And in that seeing, something passes between you that words could never capture. He nods, almost imperceptibly, and then his gaze moves on. Historians still argue about the relationship between Zen Buddhism and the Korean tea ceremony. Some see the ceremony as a direct expression of Zen principles, the emphasis on presence, the attention to ordinary actions, the rejection of verbal instruction in favor of direct experience. Others argue that the ceremony has deeper roots in indigenous Korean shamanism, with its focus on hospitality and communion. Still others point to the influence of Neo-Confucianism, with its elaborate rituals and its emphasis on proper conduct as a path to virtue. The truth is probably that all of these traditions contributed to what you're experiencing now, layering their meanings and practices until the ceremony became something rich and complex, capable of holding multiple interpretations simultaneously. But in this moment, none of that matters. What matters is the silence. What matters is the presence. What matters is the strange, unexpected peace that has settled over you. A peace you didn't ask for and don't fully understand. The Zen monks in this room, and you're now certain that at least some of them are monks, despite their lay clothing, aren't being rude by ignoring you. They are not being cold or distant or unwelcoming. They are offering you something far more valuable than conversation. They are offering you their complete attention, their full presence, their willingness to simply be with you in this space without the usual social rituals that keep people at a comfortable distance. It's the most intimate thing you've ever experienced, and also the most impersonal. You're being seen without being judged. You're being held without being touched. You're being welcomed without a single word being spoken. The woman in gray lifts her head and meets your eyes. For a moment, you're caught in her gaze, and you see something there that surprises you. Not the serenity you expected, not the detachment you've associated with meditation. Something warmer, something almost playful. A twinkle, you realize. A genuine, human twinkle. As if she's sharing a joke with you that no one else in the room can hear. And then it's gone. And she's still again. Composed again. The perfect image of a Zen practitioner. But you saw it. You saw the person behind the practice. The woman behind the monk. And somehow, that glimpse makes everything else possible. If she can be human and still sit here in perfect stillness, then maybe you can too. Maybe the goal isn't to transcend your humanity, but to inhabit it more fully. To be exactly who you are, with all your flaws and fears and failures, and still find a way to be present. Still find a way to be still. Still find a way to be here, now, in this room, with these people, drinking tea that was made just for you. The silence breaks, but not with words. It breaks with sound. A soft, deliberate sound that you've been hearing all evening but only now truly register. The sound of sipping. Master Huang has lifted his bowl, the one he drank from earlier, and he's taking another sip. Not because there's tea left, there isn't, but because the act of sipping, the sound of sipping, is itself a form of communication. He's not drinking, he's demonstrating. He's reminding everyone in the room that there is a correct way to make this sound, and that the sound matters. You've heard about this, of course. The Japanese have their slurping rituals for noodles and tea, and the Koreans have something similar. But you always assumed it was about practicality, cooling the food, aerating the liquid, enhancing the flavor. And it is, partly. But in the Joseon tea ceremony, the sound of sipping carries a much deeper meaning. It's an expression of appreciation, a way of telling the host, the farmer, the universe itself that you value what you've been given. To sip silently is to withhold gratitude. To sip too loudly is to perform gratitude rather than feel it. The perfect sip, the ideal sip, is spontaneous and genuine, a sound that arises naturally from the encounter between tea and drinker, not a sound that's manufactured for social effect. You think about your own sipping earlier. 3 sips, moderately loud, as you tried to match what you'd observed. But were they genuine? Did they arise from your actual experience of the tea? Or were they performed for the room? You're not sure. You're not sure you even know what genuine sounds like anymore. After a lifetime of performing for others, of modulating your voice and your expressions and your reactions to fit social expectations, the tea ceremony, you're beginning to understand, is not just about learning new rules. It's about unlearning old ones. About stripping away the layers of performance until what's left is simply you, simply present, simply sipping tea and making whatever sound arises naturally from that simple act. The younger man lifts his bowl and sips. His sound is different from Master Huang's, softer, more delicate, like wind through leaves. The elderly man follows, his sip deeper, more resonant, like water over stones. And then the woman in grey lifts her bowl, and her sip is unlike any you've heard before. It's almost musical, a single clear note that hangs in the air for a moment before fading. You realize that each of them has developed their own sipping signature, their own way of making this sound that is both correct and uniquely theirs. The ceremony doesn't demand uniformity. It demands authenticity within a framework. Be yourself, it says, but be yourself in a way that honors the tea, the host, the tradition, and everyone else in the room. It's a paradox, and like all paradoxes, it can't be solved, only lived. Now all eyes turn to you, not demanding, not judging, but waiting, inviting. You lift your bowl, though you know there's no tea in it, and you bring it to your lips. And for a moment, you have no idea what sound will come out. You're not in control. Your throat, your mouth, your breath, they'll do whatever they do, and you'll have to live with it. You sip. The sound that emerges is somewhere between the younger man's delicacy and the elderly man's depth. A little uncertain, a little rough around the edges, but unmistakably yours. You lower the bowl and look around the room. No one reacts. No one nods or smiles or gives any sign of approval. But you feel it anyway, a subtle shift in the atmosphere, a sense that something has been accepted. You've made your sound. You've added your voice to the chorus. And the chorus, somehow, is richer for it. This, you realize, is the genius of the tea ceremony's approach to something as simple as sipping. By making the sound meaningful, by elevating it from mere practicality to genuine expression, the tradition transforms an ordinary act into an opportunity for connection. Every time you sip, you're not just drinking, you're communicating. You're telling the world how you feel, what you value, who you are. And the world, in the form of the other people in the room, is listening. Not judging, not evaluating, but simply receiving. Being present with you in your sipping, the way you've been present with them in theirs. Historians still argue about the origins of this emphasis on audible appreciation. Some trace it to agricultural rituals, where farmers would make sounds of enjoyment while eating the first harvest of the year, thanking the gods and the earth for their bounty. Others see the influence of Chinese tea culture, where slurping was documented as early as the Tang Dynasty. Still others suggest that the practice developed independently in Korea, arising from the particular character of Korean tea, greener, fresher, more delicate than the fermented teas popular in China, requiring a different kind of attention and a different kind of appreciation. Whatever its origins, by the Joseon period, the audible sip had become so central to tea culture that its absence was considered a serious breach of etiquette. To drink silently was to reject the entire enterprise, to refuse to participate in the conversation that the tea made possible. You think about your own tea drinking at home, the way you gulp down mugs of black tea while scrolling through your phone, barely tasting what you're consuming. The sound you make in those moments, if you make any sound at all, is the sound of distraction, of hurry, of a life lived on the surface. You've never thought of it that way before, but now you can't think of it any other way. Your sipping has been a confession, a revelation of your inner state. And your inner state, if you're honest, has been a mess. Scattered, anxious, never fully present. The tea ceremony hasn't just taught you how to sip properly. It's shown you who you are when you sip, and who you could be if you paid attention. Master Huang lifts his bowl one more time, and this time his sip is different. Longer, slower, more deliberate. He's not demonstrating now. He's savoring. He's taking the last possible moment of connection with the tea, the bowl, the ceremony, before it all ends. And as he sips, you feel something shift in the room. A gathering, a preparation, a sense that the end is approaching. The ceremony has reached its peak, and now it will begin its slow descent back to ordinary life. But ordinary life, you suspect, will not feel quite so ordinary after this. Something has changed in you. Something has shifted, and you're not sure yet what it is or where it will lead. But you know, with a certainty that surprises you, that it matters. The final sips have been taken, the last sounds have faded, and now the ceremony faces its most delicate challenge: what to do with what remains. In front of each guest sits a bowl that once held tea, and in each bowl, a small amount of liquid lingers. Not much, just a mouthful, perhaps less. But that mouthful, that remnant, carries more weight than all the tea that came before. How you handle it will define your entire performance. Whether you're remembered as a person of grace and understanding, or as a barbarian who never quite got it, will be decided in the next few moments. You watch the elderly man, hoping for guidance. He lifts his bowl, but he doesn't drink. He holds it, studying the remaining tea as if it contains the secrets of the universe. Then he tilts it slightly, watching the liquid move, watching the light play across its surface. He's not in a hurry. He's not thinking about what comes next. He's fully present with this last mouthful, this final opportunity to be with the tea before it's gone forever. Minutes pass, or maybe seconds. Time has become unreliable again, stretching and contracting in ways you can't track. Finally, slowly, he raises the bowl to his lips and drinks. Not all of it. He leaves a few drops behind. Then he sets the bowl down, rotates it, and returns his hands to his lap. The ceremony continues, and you're left to puzzle out what just happened. The younger man is next. He does something different. He drinks almost all the tea, leaving just a thin film on the bottom of the bowl. Then he lifts the bowl again, tilting it to examine that film, before setting it down with what looks like satisfaction. The woman in gray does something else entirely. She doesn't drink at all. She simply holds the bowl for a long moment, then sets it down, leaving the tea untouched. You're confused now, thoroughly confused. 3 people, 3 approaches, all apparently correct. What are you supposed to do? How much tea should you leave? Is there a rule? Or is it all improvisation? Master Huang, seeing your confusion, does something unexpected. He speaks, not to the room, but to you directly. His voice is soft, barely above a whisper, but every word is clear. The tea that remains, he says, is not waste. It is memory. It is gratitude. It is the acknowledgement that no experience can be consumed completely, that something always lingers. How you honor that lingering is between you and the tea. There is no rule. There is only attention. And suddenly, you understand. The amount of tea you leave isn't the point. The point is that you leave something, that you acknowledge, through this small act of restraint, That the tea is not yours to consume entirely. That it came from somewhere, and will go somewhere, and you are just one moment in its long journey. The elderly man left a few drops to honor the future. The next person who would drink from this bowl. The next ceremony that would use these leaves. The younger man left a film to honor the past. The farmer who grew the tea. The hands that picked it. The long tradition that made this moment possible. The woman in gray left it all to honor the present. To show that she needed nothing, wanted nothing, was complete in this moment exactly as it was. 3 approaches, 3 philosophies, 3 ways of being with what remains. And all of them correct, because all of them were authentic. You lift your bowl. The tea inside is cold now, or at least cooler than it was, but that doesn't matter. What matters is what you do with it. You hold it, as the elderly man did, watching the liquid move. You tilt it, as the younger man did, studying the way the light catches the surface. You feel its weight, its temperature, its presence in your hands. And then you make a decision. You drink half. Not most, not all, not none. Half. You leave half the remaining tea in the bowl. A clear statement that you're not sure yet, that you're still learning, that you're holding space for both past and future without committing fully to either. It's not a choice any of the others made. It's not a choice you've ever seen before. But it's your choice, your response to this moment, your way of being with what remains. And when you set the bowl down, rotating it carefully, you feel something shift inside you. You've made a decision. You've acted authentically within the framework of the ceremony. And for the first time since you arrived, you feel like you belong here. Historians still argue about the significance of leftover tea in Joseon ceremonies. Some texts describe elaborate rules about exactly how many drops should remain, depending on the season, the tea, and the status of the drinker. Others suggest that the amount left was deliberately ambiguous, a space for individual expression within the rigid structure of the ritual. The truth, as with so much about the tea ceremony, probably lies somewhere in between. There were guidelines, expectations, things that would be noticed and remembered. But there was also freedom, room for the drinker's personality to emerge, space for the unpredictable human element that makes ritual alive rather than mechanical. The tea ceremony wasn't about following rules. It was about inhabiting them so fully that they ceased to be rules and became simply the way you move through the world. You look at your bowl, half empty, half full, a perfect expression of your current state. You're half in and half out of this world, half understanding and half confused, half belonging and half outsider. And somehow, in this room, that's acceptable. That's even valuable. The ceremony doesn't demand that you become someone else. It demands that you become more fully yourself, more present, more aware, more alive. And if that self is uncertain, if that self is still learning, if that self leaves half the tea in the bowl because it doesn't know what else to do, well, that's a valid way of being too. That's a human way of being. And the tea, which has been made by humans and served by humans and drunk by humans for thousands of years, understands humans better than you might think. The bowls sit empty now, or nearly empty, each one holding the memory of tea and the trace of the person who drank it. The ceremony is drawing to a close. You can feel it in the air, in the way the guests have begun to shift ever so slightly on their cushions, in the way Master Huang's movements have become more economical, less expansive. But before it ends, there's one more layer to uncover, one more dimension of this intricate practice that you haven't yet encountered. And it begins with a question that's been lurking at the back of your mind since you arrived. What about the king? You're in the Joseon Dynasty, after all, a time when the monarchy was absolute, when the king was not just a ruler but a semi-divine figure, the Son of Heaven, the bridge between the human world and the cosmic order. Everything in this society revolved around the king, was oriented toward the king, existed in relation to the king. And tea was no exception. The royal court had its own tea rituals, its own tea masters, its own elaborate protocols for preparing and serving tea to the monarch. And those protocols, you're about to learn, made what you've experienced tonight look like casual improvisation. Master Huang, as if reading your thoughts, begins to speak. His voice is still soft, still measured, but there's a new note in it now, a hint of something like reverence, or perhaps caution. He's talking about the court, about the king, about the tea ceremonies that took place in the palaces of Hanyang while you were sitting here in this humble tea house. And as he speaks, you begin to understand that the ceremony you've just experienced is a kind of shadow, a reflection, a simplified version of something far more complex and far more dangerous. In the royal court, tea was not just tea. It was a matter of life and death. Literally. Every cup that reached the king's lips had been tested, tasted, examined by a hierarchy of officials whose sole job was to ensure that the Son of Heaven survived another day. The tea leaves came from royal plantations, guarded by soldiers, harvested by specially trained workers who were searched before and after their shifts. The water came from sacred springs, sealed and transported under armed escort. The bowls were made by royal potters, fired in royal kilns, inspected by royal officials for any flaw that might conceal poison or ill intent. And the person who prepared the tea, the royal tea master, was one of the most trusted and most vulnerable people in the entire kingdom. Trusted because he had the king's life in his hands. Vulnerable because if anything went wrong, if the king so much as hiccuped after drinking, that tea master's life would end in ways too horrible to describe. You think about Master Huang, about the care he's shown all evening, and you realize that his attention to detail, his obsession with temperature and timing and placement, is not just philosophical. It's practical. It's survival. In a world where a single mistake could be fatal, where a lapse in concentration could be interpreted as malice, where every movement was watched and judged and remembered, the tea master's precision was not optional. It was essential. And the fact that Master Huang has survived long enough to become a master, to sit at the center of this ceremony and guide you through it, is proof that his attention has never wavered. Not once. Not for a single moment in decades of service. The elderly man nods, adding his own observations. He's been to the court, it seems, or at least knows people who have. He describes a ceremony he witnessed once, many years ago, when the king received a delegation from the Ming Emperor. The tea that day was prepared with such care, such elaborate ritual, that it took 3 hours from the moment the water was heated to the moment the king took his first sip. 3 hours. And during those 3 hours, not a single person in the room moved unnecessarily. Not a single word was spoken. Not a single breath was drawn too loudly. The tension was so thick, he says, that you could have cut it with a knife and served it with the tea. And when the king finally drank, when he set down his bowl and nodded his approval, the relief in the room was so palpable that several officials actually wept. You try to imagine it. 3 hours of perfect stillness, perfect attention, perfect control. 3 hours of knowing that any mistake, any twitch, any errant thought could be your last. 3 hours of holding your breath while someone else holds the king's life in their hands. It's unimaginable. It's impossible. And yet people did it, generation after generation, because the alternative was unthinkable. Because in a world without elections, without constitutions, without any of the safeguards you take for granted, the king's survival was the only thing standing between order and chaos. If the king died, especially if he died by poison, the consequences could ripple outward for decades. Wars could start. Dynasties could fall. Millions could die. All because someone's attention wandered at exactly the wrong moment. Historians still argue about how many Korean kings were actually assassinated through tea. The official records are frustratingly vague, full of euphemisms and omissions and deliberate obfuscations. Some scholars point to kings who died suddenly, inexplicably, after apparently healthy lives. Others note the elaborate precautions that developed over time, the layers of protection that suggest a real and present danger. Still others argue that the threat of poison was exaggerated, a convenient excuse for the court's elaborate rituals and the tea master's extraordinary power. The truth, as always, is probably somewhere in between. Some kings were probably poisoned. Others probably died naturally, their deaths attributed to poison by enemies or allies for their own purposes. And the tea ceremony, with its attention to every detail, its obsession with purity and precision, became the stage on which these dramas played out. You look at your bowl, empty now, harmless now, and you try to imagine it filled with poison. You try to imagine drinking from it, knowing that the liquid in your mouth could be your last. And you realize that the tea ceremony, for all its beauty and peace, was also a theater of survival. A place where life and death were negotiated in every sip, every gesture, every moment of attention. The people in this room, these calm, composed, seemingly serene people, have all learned to move through a world where a single mistake could be fatal. And the reason they are so still, so controlled, so present, is not because they've transcended fear. It's because they've learned to live with it, to incorporate it into their practice, to let it sharpen their attention rather than dull it. Master Huang lifts his bowl one last time, holding it up to the light. There's nothing in it now, no tea, no residue, nothing but the memory of what was. But he looks at it with the same intensity he's shown all evening, the same attention, the same presence. And you understand that this is the final lesson of the tea ceremony. It's not about the tea. It's not about the ritual. It's about the attention itself. The ability to be fully present, fully aware, fully alive. Whether you're serving a king or sitting in a humble tea house with a group of strangers. The tea is just the excuse. The attention is the point. And if you can learn to pay attention like this, to be present like this, to move through the world with this kind of awareness, then nothing can touch you. Not poison. Not fear. Not even death itself. The talk of kings and courts fades, and the room settles back into its comfortable silence. But your mind is still racing, still trying to process everything you've learned, still attempting to fit these new pieces into your understanding of tea and its place in this world. And as you sit there, turning over the image of royal tea masters and poisoned bowls, you realize that there's a gap in your knowledge, a basic assumption that you've been carrying all evening without ever questioning it. What kind of tea have you been drinking? What exactly is in that bowl? You've been assuming, because you're a product of your time and place, that the tea in question is matcha. That bright green powder, whipped into a froth, served in beautiful bowls. It's what you think of when you think of East Asian tea ceremonies. But as you look at the bowls around you, as you remember the pale green liquid you drank earlier, you realize that it wasn't matcha. It was something else. Something leafier, more delicate, more translucent. And now, as if sensing your confusion, Master Huang begins to prepare one final serving of tea. Not for drinking. Everyone has had enough. But for showing. For teaching. For revealing what you've been missing. He reaches for a different container this time. A small ceramic jar sealed with cloth and string. He unties it carefully, revealing dried leaves inside. But these aren't the powdered leaves of matcha, ground to a fine dust between stone wheels. These are whole leaves, or nearly whole, twisted and curled and dark green, like tiny fossils of the plants they once were. He takes a small handful and places them in a fresh bowl, then pours hot water over them. The leaves begin to unfurl immediately, slowly, like time-lapse photography of spring. They expand, they relax, they release their color into the water until the liquid is a pale, almost luminous green. And then he hands the bowl to you. You look inside. The leaves have settled at the bottom, fully open now, revealing themselves as whole leaves after all. Not powder, not dust, just leaves, the way they grew on the mountain, the way they were picked and dried and stored. You realize that everything you thought you knew about East Asian tea was filtered through Japan, through the matcha ceremony that became famous worldwide. But Korea had its own tradition, its own tea, its own way of preparing and serving. And that tea was not matcha. It was nokcha, green tea, made from whole leaves steeped in hot water. Simpler, in some ways. More direct. Closer to the tea you know from your own world, yet utterly different in the attention it demands and the experience it provides. You lift the bowl and inhale. The scent is familiar now, grassy, slightly sweet, with that hint of something almost like seaweed. But it's stronger than before, more present, more alive. These leaves are fresher, perhaps, or you're more attuned to their character. You sip, and the flavor floods your mouth. It's not the delicate, almost elusive taste of the earlier servings. It's bold, assertive, unmistakably green. You taste the mountain where it grew, the rain that fell on it, the hands that picked it. You taste the sun and the soil and the long tradition of cultivating this particular plant in this particular place. And you understand, with a clarity that surprises you, that this is what tea is supposed to be. Not a product, not a commodity, not something you buy in a box and forget about, but a living connection to the earth and the people who tend it. The elderly man smiles, the first real smile you've seen from him all evening. In Japan, he says softly, they grind the leaves to powder. They whisk them into foam. They create a ritual that is beautiful, profound, worthy of respect. But we Koreans prefer to see our tea, to watch it unfurl, to witness the whole leaf becoming itself again in hot water. It is a different philosophy, a different way of being with the plant. You nod, understanding more than you can express. The difference between matcha and nokcha is not just a difference in preparation. It's a difference in worldview. Matcha is about transformation, about taking something and changing it completely, grinding it into something new. Nokcha is about revelation, about taking something and allowing it to become what it already is. Both are valid. Both are beautiful. But sitting here, in this Korean tea house, with these Korean tea drinkers, you understand why they've chosen this path. It's humbler, in a way, less about human skill and more about plant nature. Less about what we can do and more about what we can witness. Historians still argue about when and why Korea developed its own tea tradition, distinct from the Chinese and Japanese practices that surrounded it. Some point to the geography of the peninsula, with its mountains and valleys creating microclimates that favored certain types of tea. Others emphasize the cultural exchange with Tang China, which brought new ideas about tea preparation that Koreans adapted to their own tastes. Still others see the influence of Korean Buddhism, with its emphasis on seeing things as they really are, on witnessing rather than transforming. Whatever the reasons, by the Joseon period, Korean tea culture had developed its own character, its own rituals, its own aesthetic. And that aesthetic, you're now experiencing firsthand, is one of simplicity, of clarity, of letting things be themselves. You look at the leaves in your bowl, fully unfurled now, resting at the bottom like a memory of the mountain. They've given everything they have to this water, this moment, this experience. And when you're done, when the ceremony finally ends, they'll be discarded, composted, returned to the earth that made them. Nothing wasted, nothing held back, just a gift, given freely, received gratefully, and then released. It's the most beautiful thing you've ever witnessed, and also the saddest. Because nothing lasts. Not the tea, not the ceremony, not this moment. But maybe that's the point. Maybe the beauty is in the impermanence, in the knowledge that this will never happen again, exactly this way, with these people, this tea, this light. And because it will never happen again, it matters more, demands more attention, deserves to be fully experienced while it lasts. The leaves have settled, the tea has been tasted, and the room holds its collective breath. But there's something in the air now that wasn't there before. A heaviness, a shadow, a sense that we're about to turn a corner into darker territory. Master Huang's hands, which have been so steady all evening, pause for just a moment longer than usual as he reaches for the kettle. His eyes drift toward the door, then back to the bowl in front of him. And you realize that he's not just performing a ritual. He's performing an act of resistance, an act of survival, an act of remembering something that everyone in this room would rather forget. The year is not specified, but it doesn't need to be. Every Korean in this room knows the history, knows the dates, knows the horrors that befell their ancestors. The Japanese invasions, the Imjin War, 7 years of brutal occupation, of villages burned and people slaughtered, of cultural treasures destroyed and traditions nearly erased. The tea ceremony, this delicate, beautiful, fragile practice, was one of the things the invaders tried to destroy. They killed the tea masters. They burned the tea houses. They chopped down the tea plants and salted the earth where they grew. They wanted to erase not just the Korean people, but Korean culture itself. And for a while, it looked like they might succeed. But they didn't. And the reason they didn't is sitting in this room, in the hands of Master Huang, in the stillness of the elderly man, in the quiet presence of the woman in gray. The tea ceremony survived because people like this kept doing it, kept practicing it, kept passing it down, even when it was dangerous, even when it could mean death. They met in secret, in caves and forests and hidden rooms. They used whatever bowls they could find, whatever tea they could salvage, whatever water was available. They kept the ritual alive not because it was easy, but because it was necessary. Because without it, they would have lost not just their tea, but themselves. You look at Master Huang's hands with new eyes. The way he holds the bowl, the way he rotates it, the way he sets it down, these aren't just habits. They are acts of defiance. Every movement is a statement. We are still here. Every gesture is a declaration. You did not win. Every sip is a prayer. Remember what they tried to take from us, and remember that we kept it anyway. The tea ceremony, you now understand, is not just a cultural practice. It's a memorial, a living monument to everyone who died to keep it alive. A way of saying, with every cup, that some things are worth dying for, and some things are worth living for, and some things are both at the same time. The elderly man speaks, his voice even softer than before. He talks about his grandfather, who was a tea master before the war, who fled into the mountains with nothing but a tea bowl and a handful of seeds, who planted those seeds in secret, in a hidden valley, and tended them for years while the Japanese scoured the countryside for anyone who might be resisting, who taught his son, this man's father, to make tea in the darkness of a cave, by feel and memory and pure faith, who died never knowing if the tradition would survive him, and whose tea bowl, the very one that sits on the table before them, was carried through those years and passed down through generations until it reached this room, this moment, this ceremony. You look at the bowl differently now. It's not just a beautiful object. It's a survivor. It's been through hell and come out the other side. It's held tea for people who were about to die, and for people who lived to tell their stories, and for people who told those stories to their children, and for their children's children, until finally, impossibly, it's holding tea for you. A foreigner, a stranger, someone who doesn't even know how to hold it properly. And yet here it is, offering you the same warmth, the same presence, the same connection it's offered to everyone who has ever held it. The bowl doesn't judge. The bowl doesn't discriminate. The bowl just holds whatever it's given, and gives back whatever it can. The younger man adds his own story, though he speaks reluctantly, as if the words cost him something. His great-grandmother was a tea woman, one of the few female practitioners in a tradition dominated by men. When the Japanese came, they didn't just kill the tea masters. They killed their families too. His great-grandmother watched her husband and sons die, then gathered what she could and fled south. She walked for weeks, carrying nothing but a bag of tea seeds and a single bowl. She found refuge in a mountain village, where she started over, planted her seeds, built a new life, and every day, no matter what, she made tea. For herself, for the dead, for the future she couldn't see but refused to stop believing in. That bowl, the one she carried through the war, is the bowl the woman in grey has been using all evening. You turn to look at her, and for the first time, you see the bowl in her hands differently. It's not just old. It's ancient. It's witnessed things you can't imagine. It's been held by hands that are dust now, by people whose names are forgotten, by generations of women who kept the tradition alive when keeping it alive could mean death. And now she's holding it, this quiet woman in grey, and she's offering it to the ceremony, to the room, to you. Not as a relic or a museum piece, but as a living thing, as a participant, as a member of this community, as much as any human here. Historians still argue about the full impact of the Japanese invasions on Korean tea culture. Some say the tradition was nearly destroyed, reduced to a shadow of its former self. Others point to the resilience of the Korean people, the way they rebuilt and recovered and kept their culture alive against impossible odds. The truth, as always, is somewhere in between. The war was devastating. Thousands of tea masters died. Countless tea houses were destroyed. Entire regions lost their tea traditions forever. But enough survived. Enough people carried enough seeds, enough bowls, enough knowledge to keep the tradition alive. And now, centuries later, you're sitting in a tea house that exists because of their courage, drinking tea that grows from their seeds, holding bowls that they carried through hell, and learning, slowly, what it means to be part of a tradition that has faced death and refused to die. Master Huang lifts his bowl, and for a moment, he holds it toward the door. Toward the east, where Japan lies. Toward the past, where the invaders came from. It's not a gesture of anger or hatred. It's something more complicated. Acknowledgement, perhaps. Recognition that the relationship between Korea and Japan is long and tangled and full of pain, but also full of connection. The Japanese took much, but they also gave much. Their own tea ceremony, beautiful and profound, grew from seeds they planted in Korean soil centuries ago. And now, in this room, the two traditions exist in parallel, separate but connected, each bearing the marks of the other. The bowl in Master Huang's hands is Korean, but the way he holds it has been shaped by centuries of interaction with Japan. The tea in the bowl is Korean, but the way it's prepared reflects influences from across the sea. Nothing is pure. Nothing is untouched. Everything carries the weight of history, the scars of encounter, the memory of violence and beauty intertwined. He sets the bowl down and meets your eyes. The tea remembers, he says quietly. The tea remembers everything. The good and the bad. The beautiful and the terrible. And when we drink it, we remember too. We remember who we were, who we became, who we still might be. That is why we do this. That is why we will always do this. Not because it's easy, not because it's comfortable, but because it's true. And the truth, however painful, is worth remembering. The weight of history settles over the room, heavy but not crushing. These people have carried it for generations, and they've learned how to hold it without being destroyed by it. You're just beginning to understand what that costs, what it means to live with memory that never fades, with loss that never fully heals. But the ceremony continues, because the ceremony always continues. And now it's bringing you face to face with another layer of this complex tradition, the role of women. You've been aware of the woman in grey all evening, of course. Her stillness, her presence, the way she seems to see everything without appearing to look. But you haven't really thought about what it means for her to be here, in this room, with these men, participating in this ritual. In the Joseon Dynasty, a woman's place was strictly defined. She was daughter, wife, mother, always in relation to men, always subordinate, always confined to specific spaces and specific roles. The tea ceremony, like so much else, was supposed to be a male domain. Women could prepare tea at home, for their families, but public ceremonies, formal gatherings, the kind of ritual you're witnessing tonight, those were for men only. And yet here she is, sitting among them, participating fully, being treated as an equal by everyone in the room. How is this possible? The answer, you're beginning to understand, is complicated. It involves class and education and the particular circumstances of her life. She's clearly wealthy, or at least comfortable. Her clothes, though simple, are made of fine materials. She's clearly educated. The way she spoke about the bowl, the precision of her language, marks her as someone who's studied the classics. And she's clearly older, past childbearing age, which in Confucian society meant more freedom, more mobility, more opportunity to move in spaces that would have been closed to her as a younger woman. But even with all these advantages, her presence here is extraordinary. It's a statement, a challenge, a quiet but unmistakable assertion that women have a place in this tradition, whether the tradition acknowledges it or not. You watch her now as Master Huang prepares another bowl of tea. This time, when it's ready, he serves her first, before the elderly man, before the younger man, before you. It's a deliberate choice, a signal to everyone in the room that she occupies a position of honor. And as she receives the bowl, as she performs the ritual of appreciation with the same grace she's shown all evening, you realize that she's not just a guest here. She's a teacher, a master in her own right, recognized by the others as someone who has something to offer, something to share, something that the tradition needs to survive. Historians still argue about the role of women in Joseon tea culture. The official records, written by men for men, barely mention them. But scattered through the archives are hints, glimpses, suggestions that women were more involved than the official story admits. There are poems written by women about tea, celebrating its beauty and its solace. There are letters mentioning women who were known for their skill in preparation, their knowledge of leaves, their ability to create ceremonies that moved the soul. There are even a few accounts of all-female tea gatherings, where women gathered in secret to practice their own rituals, their own traditions, their own ways of being with tea. The evidence is fragmentary, but it's enough to suggest that the woman in grey is not alone. That she represents a hidden history, a parallel tradition, a world of tea that existed alongside the male-dominated ceremonies and enriched them in ways that were rarely acknowledged. She drinks, and as she drinks, you notice something about the way the men in the room are watching her. There's respect in their eyes, genuine respect, but there's also something else. Something like wonder. Like they are seeing something they don't fully understand, something that transcends the categories they usually use to make sense of the world. She's not just a woman making tea. She's a presence, a force, a living reminder that the tradition is bigger than any single interpretation of it. She holds the bowl, and the bowl seems to glow in her hands. She sips, and the sound she makes is the most beautiful sound you've heard all evening. She sets the bowl down, and the way she rotates it, the way she releases it, feels like a blessing. Like she's not just finishing her own tea, but consecrating the tea for everyone who will come after. The younger man speaks, addressing her directly for the first time. He asks a question about the bowl, about its history, about the woman who carried it through the war. And she answers, her voice soft but clear, telling a story you haven't heard before. The woman who carried that bowl was not his great-grandmother, though they are related. She was something else. A teacher, a mentor, a woman who saw something in a young girl and decided to pass on everything she knew. The bowl came to her not through blood, but through choice, through recognition, through the kind of connection that transcends biology and becomes something deeper. And now she's here, holding it, using it, continuing the chain of transmission that began with a woman who refused to let the tradition die. You think about your own place in this chain, or rather, your absence from it. You have no connection to this tradition, no ancestors who practiced it, no claim to participate in it at all. And yet here you are, being welcomed, being taught, being allowed to witness something that most people will never see. Why? What do you have to offer? What makes you worthy of this gift? The answer, when it comes, is both simple and profound. Nothing. You have nothing to offer. You're not worthy. And that's exactly why they've welcomed you. Because the tea ceremony isn't about worthiness. It's not about who deserves to participate and who doesn't. It's about presence, about attention, about being here, now, fully, without pretense or performance. You're here because you're here. You're welcome because you came. And the tea, which has been shared with strangers for thousands of years, doesn't care about your ancestry or your qualifications. It only cares that you're present, that you're paying attention, that you're willing to receive what it has to offer. The woman in grey finishes her story and sets down the bowl. She looks at you, really looks at you, and for a moment, you're caught in her gaze. There's no judgment there, no evaluation, no comparison, just recognition, just welcome, just the simple, profound acknowledgement that you exist, that you're here, that you matter. And in that look, you understand something you've been missing all evening. The tea ceremony isn't about the tea. It isn't about the bowls or the water or the rituals. It's about this moment of connection, this recognition of shared humanity, this willingness to be present with each other, fully present, without defense or distraction. The tea is just the excuse. The ceremony is just the framework. What matters is what happens between people when they stop performing and start being. And what's happening between you and this woman, right now. in this moment, is the most real thing you've experienced all night. The moment passes, as all moments must, but something lingers. A warmth, a connection, a sense that you've crossed some threshold and can never go back to the person you were before. The woman in grey returns her attention to the bowl, and the ceremony continues its slow, inevitable progress toward conclusion. But you're not the same. You'll never be the same. And as the final movements of the ritual unfold, you find yourself paying attention in a way you couldn't have imagined just a few hours ago. Master Huang begins to clean. Not hastily, not carelessly, but with the same deliberate attention he's shown all evening. He gathers the bowls, one by one, and rinses them with hot water. He wipes them with a silk cloth, gently, reverently, as if each bowl is a living thing that might be hurt by rough handling. He arranges them on the low table, not randomly but in a specific order, a specific orientation, a specific relationship to each other and to the room. The wastewater is poured into a special container, to be disposed of later in a special way. The leftover leaves are gathered and set aside, to be returned to the earth, to become compost, to nourish the next generation of tea plants. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is treated as garbage. Everything is honored, even in its disposal. The other guests begin to stir, shifting on their cushions, preparing to leave. But no one rushes. No one jumps up and heads for the door. The transition from ceremony to ordinary life is itself ceremonial. A gradual unwinding of the attention that has held them all evening. The elderly man stretches his legs, slowly, carefully, as if rediscovering his body after a long absence. The younger man rolls his shoulders, working out the stiffness that has accumulated during hours of stillness. The woman in grey adjusts her clothing, smoothing the folds of her hanbok, preparing herself to re-enter the world outside. And you, watching them, realize that you're doing the same thing. Stretching, shifting, gradually returning to yourself, to your body, to the ordinary awareness that you left behind when you entered this room. Master Huang finishes his cleaning and sits back, his hands resting on his thighs. For a long moment, no one moves. Then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, the elderly man bows. Not a deep bow, not a formal bow, just a slight inclination of his head toward Master Huang. A thank you, a recognition, a closing of the circle. The younger man does the same, and the woman in grey. And then you, copying them, bowing your own imperfect bow. Master Huang acknowledges each bow with a slight nod, his expression unchanged but his eyes warmer than they were at the beginning. And then, without any signal you can detect, the ceremony is over. The spell is broken. The guests begin to rise, to gather their things, to prepare for the walk home. You rise too, your legs stiff, your back sore, your mind full of images and insights you're still trying to process. The woman in grey catches your eye and smiles, a real smile, warm and genuine, before turning to speak with the elderly man. The younger man approaches you, hesitates for a moment, then bows. A deeper bow than you deserve, than you've earned. You did well, he says quietly, for a first time. And then he's gone, moving toward the door with the easy grace of someone who belongs here, who will always belong here, who carries the ceremony in his bones. You stand there, uncertain what to do next. Should you leave? Should you stay? Should you say something to Master Huang? Thank him somehow for the gift he's given you? But before you can decide, he's beside you. His presence is quiet and steady as it's been all evening. He doesn't speak. He simply looks at you. The same assessing look he gave you when you first arrived, but different now. Softer. More accepting. And then he reaches out and places something in your hand. A small packet, wrapped in cloth. You don't need to open it to know what it is. Tea leaves. A gift. A reminder. An invitation to continue, to practice, to remember what you've learned here tonight. You bow as deeply as you can, trying to put into that bow everything you can't say. Thank you. I'm sorry for my mistakes. I'll never forget this. He acknowledges your bow with a nod. And then he turns away, returning to his bowls, his kettle, his quiet world of tea. You've been dismissed, released, sent back to your own life with a packet of leaves and a head full of memories that will take years to fully understand. You walk out of the tea house, through the courtyard, past the gate where your shoes are waiting. The night air hits you like a wave, cool and fresh after the warmth of the room. The sky is still the color of bruised plums, but darker now, closer to true night. Stars are beginning to appear, faint pinpricks of light in the deepening blue. You stand there for a moment, breathing, feeling the ground beneath your feet, the weight of your body, the strange lightness in your chest. And then you start walking, back through the narrow alleyways of Hanyang, back toward whatever future awaits you. But the tea follows you. Not literally. You left the bowl behind, left the ceremony behind, left the tea house behind. But something of it clings to you, something you can't shake. The taste of that first sip, the feel of the bowl in your hands, the sound of the woman's sip, the weight of history in every gesture. You'll dream about it tonight. You know. You'll wake up reaching for a bowl that isn't there, listening for a silence that won't come. And tomorrow, when you make your own tea, in your own world, with your own modern habits, you'll do it differently. You'll pause before you pour. You'll notice the steam. You'll hold the cup with both hands and remember, for just a moment, what it felt like to be fully present. And maybe, just maybe, that will be enough. The night wraps around you like a blanket, soft and warm and full of stars. The alleyways narrow and widen, twist and turn. But you don't get lost. You don't need to. The path is clear, even in the darkness, even without a map. You walk, and as you walk, the tea house recedes behind you, becoming smaller, fainter, until it's just a memory, just a dream, just a story you'll tell yourself on cold nights when you need to remember what presence feels like. But the tea stays with you. The tea always stays with you. And somewhere in the hills above Hanyang, in a hidden valley where the tea plants still grow, the ceremony continues. It will always continue. As long as there are hands to hold bowls, and water to pour, and people willing to sit in silence together, the tea will be made. The tradition will survive. And somewhere, sometime, another stranger will stumble into a tea house uninvited and learn, as you've learned, what it means to be fully alive. Now it's time to rest. The journey is over. The tea is drunk. The bowls are clean. Let the silence hold you, the way the tea held you, the way the ceremony held everyone in that room. Let your breathing slow, your thoughts settle, your body relax into the darkness. You've done enough. You've learned enough. You've been present enough. And now, all that's left is to sleep, to dream, to carry the memory of this night into whatever tomorrow brings. So close your eyes, breathe deeply, and let the tea guide you home. The ceremony ends, but its echo lingers. You've walked through the narrow alleyways of Hanyang, sat on the hard wooden floor of the Daewon, held a bowl that survived wars and generations. You've learned about water temperature and hand placement, about silence and presence, about the weight of history and the grace of strangers. And now, as you drift toward sleep, Let the memory of that evening soften into something gentle, something warm, something that will stay with you long after the details fade. The tea house recedes, becoming smaller and smaller until it's just a point of light in the darkness of the past. The people you met there, Master Huang with his steady hands, the elderly man with his half-closed eyes, the younger man with his elegant fingers, the woman in grey with her quiet smile. They're all going about their lives now, preparing for the next ceremony, the next guest, the next opportunity to share what they know. And you, wherever you are, whenever you are, carry a piece of them with you. A piece of their attention, their presence, their way of being in the world. Tomorrow, when you make your tea, you'll remember. You'll pause before you pour. You'll notice the steam, the sound, the way the leaves unfurl in hot water. You'll hold your cup with both hands and think about the millions of people who have done the same thing, across centuries and continents, all of them seeking the same thing. A moment of peace in a chaotic world, a connection to something larger than themselves, a taste of presence that transcends the ordinary. And you'll be part of that chain, that tradition, that endless conversation between humans and tea. Not because you deserve it, not because you've earned it, but because you showed up, because you paid attention, because you were willing to learn. So rest now. Let the day go. Let the tea go. Let everything go except the simple awareness of your own breath, your own body, your own presence in this moment. The ceremony is over. The night is deep. And all that's left is to sleep, to dream, to wake tomorrow and begin again. Sweet dreams, traveler. May your tea always be hot, your bowls always beautiful, and your attention always present. Until next time.